My mate left me bleeding out alone. The Alpha King found me with minutes left. The wind howled through the jagged cliffs of Urindor, carrying with it the scent of snow and blood. In the fading light of dusk, the world seemed suspended between shadow and silence, a place where hope and despair danced side by side. Lyra ran, her breath ragged, her body trembling with pain and exhaustion. She clutched her side where a dark stain was spreading across her tunic. Her vision blurred, and every step felt like a battle against the ground itself. Her mate's betrayal had come without warning. One moment he had smiled with the warmth of someone she thought loved her, and the next he had driven a blade through her flank and vanished, leaving her to bleed out alone on the icy cliffs. The betrayal was worse than the wound, worse than the cold, worse than the fear that curled like a living thing in her chest. Lyra stumbled over a broken stone and fell to her knees. The world tilted, the wind biting at her skin. Her fingers brushed against the snow, red with her own blood, and she pressed them to her wound in a feeble attempt to stop the flow. She tried to summon the faint magic that slept in her blood, the gift she had always feared and kept hidden, but her strength faltered. The darkness creeping around the edges of her vision whispered that she would not survive. And yet, as if drawn by some unseen force, a figure appeared through the dimming light. He moved with the silence of a shadow, tall and commanding, his presence cutting through the storm like fire through ice. His eyes, the color of deep night, studied her with an intensity that made her shiver. He was the Alpha King, Kalen, ruler of Urindor, feared by enemies and revered by allies. Even the wind seemed to bow to him. Lyra's heart hammered with disbelief. He was real. He was here. And yet why? Kalen knelt beside her, his fingers brushing hers as he tested her pulse. "You should not be here," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying a weight that made the air itself tremble. "You should be dead by now." Her lips parted, but only a whisper escaped. I trusted him." Her voice cracked. "And he left me." Kalen's jaw tightened. His hand hovered over her wound, and a faint blue light began to glow from his fingertips. The snow around them shimmered as if recognizing the magic. "No one leaves you alive while I am near," he said. "Do you understand?" Lyra's mind tried to hold on to clarity, but the pain clouded everything. Her body felt like it was melting into the snow. And yet she sensed something she could not name, a strange pull, a thread connecting her life to his presence. Even as her strength failed, even as despair pressed against her ribs like a stone, she felt safe. Kalen worked quickly, his hands moving with precision and authority. His touch was firm but careful, his magic flowing into her like a river of warmth against the cold. Lyra gasped, her body stiffening as life began to return to her limbs. Slowly, color crept back into her face and the light in her eyes returned. "Stay still," Kalen commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. His gaze met hers, and for the first time she saw not only power but a flicker of something else, concern, something human. The wind carried the distant howl of wolves, but there was another sound, footsteps, approaching fast. Lyra tried to push herself up, but Kalen's hand was firm on her shoulder. "They are coming," he said. "Stay with me." Before she could speak, shadows emerged from the cliffs above. Figures in dark cloaks, their faces hidden, weapons glinting in the fading light. Lyra's breath hitched. They were from her former pack, the ones who had sworn loyalty to her mate. They had come not to save, but to finish what had been started. Kalen's eyes darkened, his body coiling like a panther ready to strike. His voice rose, commanding and cold. "You will not touch her." The shadowed hunters faltered at the power in his presence, but they advanced nonetheless, teeth bared, blades ready. Lyra tried to stand, tried to fight, but her legs trembled. She felt trapped between life and death, between fear and the strange, unbidden trust she felt for the Alpha King. Kalen moved with impossible speed, intercepting them with strength that seemed unnatural. Blows landed with the force of storms, and Lyra watched, heart hammering as he dispatched one after another with precision. Each movement was poetry, a deadly dance, yet his focus never left her. When the last of them fell, Kaelin returned to her side, kneeling in the snow. Lyra's chest rose and fell rapidly, tears mixing with the snow on her cheeks. Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Kaelin's expression softened, but only slightly. "Because someone must. And because your life is not yours to throw away." His hand hovered near hers, but he did not touch, as though afraid the bond between them was fragile, dangerous. "Do not mistake this for mercy," he said. "I have my own reasons, and this is one of them." Lyra wanted to argue, to tell him she did not belong here, that she had failed in every way. But the words died in her throat. Instead, she let herself be guided, weak and shivering, toward the dark silhouette of his castle in the distance. It rose like a black mountain, jagged towers scraping the sky, glowing faintly with runes of protection. It was both terrifying and beautiful, a place of power and legend. Inside the castle, warmth and light wrapped around her like a cloak. Servants, silent and unseen, tended to the wounds Kaelin could not reach. The air smelled of ancient stone, herbs, and something indefinable, like magic itself. Lyra was placed upon a bed of soft furs, her body trembling, her heart pounding with exhaustion and fear. Kaelin did not leave her side. He remained in the doorway, watching, silent. "Rest," he said finally. "There is danger beyond these walls, but within them you are safe, for now." Lyra nodded, too tired to speak. Her mind swirled with questions she dared not ask. Who was he truly? Why had fate brought her to his doorstep? And most importantly, why did she feel a pull toward him, a connection stronger than fear, stronger than pain? Night fell, and with it, the castle seemed to breathe around her. Shadows moved, whispers floated in the corridors, and the cold wind rattled against the windows like ghostly fingers. Lyra drifted into a fitful sleep, haunted by memories of betrayal and the piercing eyes of the Alpha King. In the deepest hours before dawn, she awoke to a soft light filtering through the tall windows. Kaelin was there, standing silently, his gaze fixed on her as if reading her very soul. "You are stronger than you realize," he said quietly. "But strength alone will not keep you alive. You must learn trust, and even then the world is cruel." Lyra's lips trembled. I don't know if I can trust anyone again." Kaelin's eyes softened for a heartbeat. "Perhaps not, but trust is not given. It is earned in moments like these, and sometimes it is chosen not by the heart but by fate." Before she could ask what he meant, a distant howl carried over the wind. A warning, a threat, a reminder that danger never sleeps. Lyra shivered, realizing that the night had only just begun, and that her life, fragile as it was now bound to the Alpha King in ways she did not yet understand. She did not know if she could survive what was coming. But in that moment, as the first light of dawn touched the frozen castle walls, she felt a strange certainty. She had been found for a reason, and that reason was far from finished. From the shadows of the corridor, unseen eyes watched the two of them. A figure moved silently, smiling faintly beneath a hood. "So the Alpha King has taken interest," the whisper said. "How deliciously inconvenient." Lyra's breath caught. Danger was not done with her yet, and neither, it seemed, was the Alpha King. The storm outside raged, and inside a bond began, fragile, dangerous, and unbreakable in ways neither of them could yet comprehend. And in that bond, the first flicker of a love neither dared name began to burn. The castle of Urindor loomed like a shadow against the pale morning sky. Snow clung to its black stone towers, and frost decorated the high windows like delicate crystal lace. Inside, the warmth of fires and the faint scent of herbs and magic offered comfort, yet the weight of unseen dangers pressed against the walls, as if the stones themselves whispered warnings. Lyra sat by a wide window in the Alpha King's private chambers, staring out at the icy cliffs where she had almost died. Her hands still trembled, not only from lingering pain, but from the memory of her mate's betrayal. The wound in her side had mostly healed, but the ache in her heart remained. She could not forget how easily trust had been broken, how quickly loyalty had turned to violence. Kalen entered without a sound, as always. He moved with the grace of a predator, silent and deliberate. His dark eyes studied her with a careful intensity, as though he were trying to read the deepest corners of her soul. "You do not speak," he said, his voice low, carrying both authority and curiosity. "You think and do not share what lies within." Lyra's gaze did not leave the snow outside. "And what would be the point?" she asked quietly. "Trust has only brought pain. I learned that too late." Kalen approached, placing a hand on the windowsill beside her. The warmth of his presence contrasted sharply with the chill of the stone chamber. "And yet you survived," he said. "You are alive, not because of anyone else, but because of your own strength, and perhaps because fate has not finished with you." Lyra shivered, not from cold but from the intensity of his words. "Fate," she whispered. "What could fate want with someone like me?" Kalen's eyes darkened, and for a moment the shadow of the Alpha King, the ruler feared by kingdoms, crossed his expression. "You are not like others," he said. "There is something in your blood, something your former mate did not understand. It is rare, powerful, dangerous, and yet it calls to me in ways I do not fully understand." Lyra turned to look at him, her heart skipping a beat. There was fear in his gaze, but also something else, something that made her pulse quicken, even though she did not yet trust it. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why do you care?" Kalen did not answer immediately. He knelt beside her, careful not to touch her unless necessary. "Care is a dangerous thing," he said finally. "For you, for me, for anyone who becomes entangled in the life of the Alpha King. I have loved before, I have lost before, and those I loved were taken from me. I cannot risk it again." Lyra's breath caught. She sensed the truth behind his words, the pain and loss buried beneath the cold mask of the king. And yet, she felt a spark of something fragile and unspoken. Something that promised protection, even as it threatened to bind her to him in ways she did not yet understand. The castle doors opened suddenly, and a young servant appeared, carrying a small bundle of herbs and a steaming cup of tea. She curtsied quickly, her eyes darting nervously between Lyra and Kalen. "Thank you," Lyra whispered, accepting the cup. The warmth seeped into her hands, and for the first time in days she felt a little of the weight of fear lift. "You must eat," Kalen said, his tone firm. "Strength will not return without it, and soon you will need all your strength." Lyra nodded, though the memory of the hunters on the cliffs made her stomach twist. "All my strength for what?" Kalen's gaze hardened. "For survival, for battle, and perhaps for something more. You have been marked by more than betrayal. Forces are moving against you, Lyra. Forces that seek to use your blood, your power, against me and my kingdom." Lyra felt a chill deeper than the winter wind outside. "Enemies?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Enemies," Kalen confirmed. "And you, whether you know it or not, are at the center of it. Your former mate, he was not acting on his own. He was influenced by a dark force. A curse that twists loyalty, that makes those who should love you turn against you." The words struck her like ice. She had thought she understood betrayal, understood danger. But this was larger than anything she could have imagined. Her heart ached not only for the wounds in her body, but for the betrayal she had believed was personal. Now it was something darker, something that stretched its fingers into every corner of her life. Kalen's hand hovered near hers. "Do not despair," he said quietly. "You are not alone, and you will not face this alone, not while I am here." Lyra wanted to believe him, wanted to reach for the warmth in his presence. But years of pain, fear, and mistrust held her back. "Why me?" she asked again. "Why would you risk your life for me when others have failed?" Kalen's gaze softened for a fleeting moment. "Because you are not like others," he said, "and because I cannot ignore what fate has set in motion. Whether I wish to or not, you are bound to me, and I to you. That bond may be our only hope." Lyra's eyes widened. "Bound, not by chains," Kaelin said, "but by something far older, something beyond understanding. Magic, blood, destiny, call it what you will, but it exists, and it is dangerous and beautiful." Before Lyra could respond, a sharp sound echoed through the halls, a warning bell, low and metallic, vibrating through the stone walls. Kaelin rose instantly, moving to the door, his senses alert. "Enemies," he said. "They are near, and they have found us sooner than I expected." Lyra struggled to stand, but Kaelin's hand steadied her. "Stay here," he commanded. "Do not move unless I call you. Your life is more important than pride or bravery." But pride and determination surged in Lyra's chest. She wanted to fight, to defend herself, to prove she was not the fragile prey left behind on the cliffs. I can help," she said, her voice firm despite her weakness. Kaelin studied her, and for a heartbeat she saw the doubt in his eyes. Then slowly he nodded. "Very well," he said, "but follow my instructions exactly. No mistakes. Do you understand?" Lyra nodded, gripping the edges of her tunic to steady herself. She did not fully understand what she was about to face, but she knew this was a turning point. She could no longer be the hunted. She had to become the survivor, and perhaps something more. The Alpha King led her through secret corridors, walls lined with ancient runes glowing faintly in the dim light. The castle was alive with whispers of old magic, as if the stones themselves were aware of the danger approaching. Lyra felt a strange thrill, a mixture of fear and exhilaration, as they moved through the shadows. At last, they emerged into the main courtyard. Snow swirled around them, carried by a sudden gust of wind. From the darkness beyond the castle walls, figures emerged, dark cloaks, faces hidden, weapons glinting. Her former mate led them, but his eyes were vacant, as if controlled by something other than himself. Lyra's breath hitched. The memories of betrayal were sharp, cutting deeper than the cold. She glanced at Kaelin, whose presence radiated power and danger. He did not hesitate. With a single motion, he summoned a barrier of glowing blue energy that separated them from the attackers. "You will not harm her," Kaelin commanded, his voice like thunder. The attackers faltered, but the one leading them, the blank-eyed figure of her former mate, charged forward. Lyra's heart lurched. She wanted to call out, to warn him, but Kaelin moved first, intercepting the attack with a force that sent snow flying in every direction. Lyra felt a surge of power within herself, unfamiliar yet exhilarating. The magic that had always been dormant began to awaken, responding to the danger, responding to her need to survive. She lifted her hands instinctively, feeling energy pulse through her veins, and a sudden wave of light surged outward, pushing the attackers back. Kaelin's eyes widened, and he did not move to stop her. Instead, he watched, calculating, approving silently. Lyra realized then that she was not powerless. She had been underestimated, not by him, not by anyone. The attackers retreated, some wounded, some terrified, but her former mate stood frozen, caught between the spell and his own resistance to it. Lyra felt pity, anger, and determination intertwining within her. She had been betrayed, but she would not be broken. Not again. Kaelin approached, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Well done," he said quietly, "but this is only the beginning. The curse that controls your former mate is not easily broken, and the enemies who seek to use you, they will not wait. You must be ready." Lyra nodded, exhaustion and adrenaline warring within her. She had faced death once and survived. She had discovered a power she never knew she possessed, and she had begun to understand the strange, binding connection with the Alpha King, dangerous, impossible, and undeniable. As the snow fell softly around them, the courtyard empty once more, Kaelin spoke in a voice that carried both warning and something unspoken. "Rest, Lyra. Learn. Grow. The storm is coming, and we must face it together. Whether you wish it or not, your life, and perhaps your heart, are bound to mine." Lyra's gaze met his, and in that moment she felt the weight of fate settle over them both. The path ahead was dark, filled with danger, betrayal, and magic. And yet, for the first time, she did not feel alone. From the shadows, silent and unseen, a pair of eyes watched them. The whisper of the wind carried a warning that chilled her to the bone. "So, the Alpha King has found her. How interesting," it hissed. "Let the games begin." And with that, the night deepened. The snow swirled, and the battle for Lyra's life and heart was only just beginning. The morning sun barely pierced the icy clouds above Urindor, but inside the castle, the warmth of firelight bathed the halls in gold and shadow. Lyra moved through the corridors with purpose, her body still sore, her mind still restless. The events of the night had awakened something in her, an energy she could not fully control, a power she had never understood. She could feel it thrumming in her veins, like a heartbeat that belonged not just to her, but to something older, stronger, and far more dangerous. Kalen followed silently behind her, his presence steady, protective, and unyielding. The Alpha King had not slept, and his dark eyes betrayed a mixture of concern and calculation. He had seen the strength that had awakened in her during the courtyard battle, and he knew it was only the beginning. "You are pushing yourself too hard," Kalen said quietly as they entered a chamber lined with books and ancient relics. "Rest is not weakness, Lyra. It is survival." Lyra shook her head. "I cannot rest while there are questions unanswered. While my former mate is out there, controlled by a curse, I cannot sit idle." Her voice was firm, determined, but there was also a tremor of fear beneath it. "I need to understand this power, this connection I have. I need to be ready." Kalen regarded her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. "Very well. But know this, the path ahead is dangerous. What you are feeling is only a fraction of the bond that exists between us. It is tied to fate, to blood, to something older than kingdoms. And it will test us both." He moved to a large table in the center of the chamber and began arranging small vials and scrolls, each glowing faintly with runes of protection and magic. Lyra watched, fascinated, as he worked with meticulous precision. The air itself seemed to hum with energy, alive with the presence of something ancient. "This," Kalen said, pointing to a scroll etched with silver ink, "is a record of the curse that has bound your former mate. It is not simple betrayal nor simple magic. It is a corruption of loyalty and love designed to twist the hearts of those most vulnerable. He was never acting on his own will." Lyra's stomach tightened. "So he was a victim too," she whispered. Kalen's gaze softened, but only slightly. "In a way. But he made choices under its influence, and those choices hurt you. The difference is you have survived, and now you have a choice. Remain a victim of circumstance or claim the strength that is yours." Lyra swallowed hard. The weight of his words sank deep into her chest. She had felt powerless, abandoned, betrayed. But now, standing in the presence of the Alpha King, she sensed something she had never known: hope. Not hope that someone would save her, but hope that she could save herself. Kalen approached, kneeling before her. His eyes, dark as midnight, searched her face. "I can teach you to control your power," he said softly, "to defend yourself, to protect those you care for, but you must trust me. And you must be willing to face what lies within you, the darkness, the fear, and the part of yourself that has been hidden for too long." Lyra nodded slowly, feeling a shiver run through her body, not from fear, but from anticipation. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded with both excitement and dread. For the next hours, Kalen trained her. They moved through the castle's training halls, where light and shadow intertwined, where magic could be summoned with a thought and honed with discipline. Lyra's power responded to her intent, blossoming like a flame she could barely contain. Each movement, each command of her energy, left her exhausted but exhilarated. And Kalen was patient, guiding her, correcting her, but never touching more than necessary. Yet despite the intensity of the training, there was a subtle tension between them. an unspoken pull, a magnetic thread that neither dared name. Lyra felt it in the way his gaze lingered on her hands as they moved through spells, in the way his voice softened when he praised her strength, and in the way her heart skipped when their fingers brushed accidentally. But there was no time for indulgence. A message arrived, carried by a swift shadow of a raven that alighted upon the window sill. The seal bore the mark of a rival kingdom, enemies who sought to exploit Lyra's blood, her power, to weaken Kaelin and seize control of Urindor. Kaelin broke the seal with a flick of his wrist. His eyes darkened as he read the contents. "They know of your power," he said grimly, "and they intend to use you as a weapon, whether you consent or not." Lyra felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "Then we must act quickly," she said. "Before they find me." Kaelin nodded. "Yes, but we must also be cautious. There is more at play here than politics or war. The curse that twisted your former mate, it is part of a larger design, and it will not be defeated by strength alone. It will take strategy, trust, and sacrifice." Lyra's stomach tightened at the word sacrifice. She had already given so much, her trust, her safety, her peace of mind. And yet she felt a strange resolve building within her. She had survived betrayal and death. She would survive this too. That night, the castle was quiet but for the crackling of firelight and the distant howls of wolves. Lyra sat in her chamber, reviewing the scrolls Kaelin had given her, trying to absorb every word, every symbol of magic and protection. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing upon her, her power, her bond with Kaelin, and the lives of those who depended on them. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. Kaelin entered, his expression unreadable, though there was a tension in his posture that betrayed the storm within him. "You must come with me," he said simply. Lyra rose, curiosity and apprehension warring within her. "Where?" she asked. "To the cliffs," he said. "There is something you must see, something that will change everything you thought you knew about your power, and about the curse that haunts you." The wind bit at their faces as they reached the cliffs, the snow swirling around them like living spirits. The view stretched for miles, the frozen landscape both beautiful and deadly. Kaelin stopped, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing to a faint shimmer of light on the distant mountains. Lyra squinted, then gasped. Figures moved within the glow, humans, wolves, and shadowed forms she could not identify. They were not far from the cliffs, but the magic surrounding them made them seem otherworldly. "They are controlled by the same curse," Kaelin said quietly, "and they are searching for you. They will not rest until they find you or until they are stopped." Lyra felt a surge of fear but also determination. "Then we stop them," she said firmly, "together." Kaelin's gaze softened, and for the first time, Lyra saw vulnerability in his eyes. "Together," he repeated. "But know this, once we confront the curse, once we face the dark forces that seek to claim you, there will be no turning back. You will be changed. We will both be changed. And some sacrifices cannot be undone." Lyra's heart raced. She had faced betrayal, near death, and the awakening of her power. She had faced Kaelin's authority, his patience, and the strange, binding connection that pulled them toward each other. And now she was being told that the path ahead would demand even more: courage, sacrifice, and perhaps even the surrender of something she had never known she held dear. The first steps toward their confrontation with the curse were taken as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the cliffs bathed in twilight. Lyra felt the magic in her veins pulse with anticipation, her heart pounding not only from fear but from a growing awareness of the bond she shared with Kaelin. As darkness fell, Kaelin placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow we begin. Tomorrow we face the curse, and whatever happens, we face it together." Lyra nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination. She had survived betrayal, wielded power she barely understood, and begun to trust someone again. Now she would face the darkness not as a victim but as a force in her own right. From the shadows of the cliffs, a pair of eyes glowed faintly. The whisper of wind carried a voice that chilled her to the bone. So, the Alpha King has trained her. How fascinating. Let us see if she is ready to face what awaits. The night deepened, the stars obscured by clouds, and the world seemed poised on the edge of a knife. Lyra knew that tomorrow would bring challenges she could not yet imagine, that the curse would test her strength, her courage, and her bond with Kaelin. And deep within her, a flame of determination burned brighter than ever. She would survive. She would fight. And she would reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. For she was no longer the hunted. She was a warrior. And the Alpha King was no longer a distant shadow. He was her ally, her protector, and perhaps something more. And somewhere in the darkness, the forces that sought to control her stirred, preparing for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of Erendor itself. The wind shrieked across the cliffs of Erendor, carrying with it snow, shadows, and the scent of magic. Lyra stood beside Kaelin at the edge of the castle walls, her cloak whipping around her as she watched the cursed forces gather in the valley below. The enemy was no longer just her former mate under the dark spell. It was a collection of twisted beings, humans, wolves, and spirits bound by the same ancient curse that had haunted her life. Kaelin's hand found hers, steady, grounding her in the storm. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low but firm. The Alpha King's eyes, dark as the midnight sky, held not only command but something far deeper, trust, and something that made her heart tremble. Lyra nodded. I've faced fear before. I can face it again." Kaelin studied her for a moment, then pressed a finger to her forehead, drawing a small line of blue magic. "Remember," he said, "this bond between us, it is our strength. Trust it, trust each other. And whatever happens, do not falter. Your heart will guide you." Lyra felt a surge of warmth where his magic touched her. She nodded again, and together they descended from the castle, their steps silent but purposeful across the frozen courtyard. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence before the storm heavy with power. As they approached the cursed army, the ground seemed to pulse beneath their feet. Shadows writhed unnaturally, and figures moved as if alive but not entirely themselves. Lyra's former mate stepped forward, his eyes blank, his expression hollow. The dagger that had once struck her now glowed faintly in his hand, controlled by the same dark force that had corrupted his heart. "Lyra," Kaelin whispered, his hand tightening around hers. "Stay focused. Remember your strength. Remember the bond." Lyra inhaled, centering herself. She could feel the power thrumming in her veins, responding to Kaelin, to the threat, and to her own resolve. Her former mate raised the dagger, and a shadow surged forward, the curse attempting to take full control. But Lyra acted first. She lifted her hands, the magic she had practiced with Kaelin flowing outward like a river of light. The dark force recoiled, hissing as if in pain. Lyra's eyes widened as she realized the connection. The curse was tied to her blood, and her magic could break it. She focused, willing the corruption to release her former mate. The dagger fell to the snow, the glow fading, and he collapsed to his knees, free at last from the spell. Kaelin moved beside her, eyes sharp, guarding, yet there was pride there as well. "Well done," he said quietly. "You have taken the first step, but the true challenge awaits." From the shadows beyond, the entity that had orchestrated the curse appeared, a figure cloaked in black, its face hidden, eyes glowing red like embers. It radiated power, malice, and a cold intelligence that made Lyra's blood run cold. "I see," the figure hissed. "The Alpha King's chosen is not so weak as I thought." Its voice was like 1,000 whispers at once. "But strength alone will not save her, nor you." Kaelin stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the figure. "You will not harm her," he said, his voice resonating with authority that shook the air. The entity laughed, a sound that carried no joy, only menace. Lyra's chest tightened, but she did not falter. She felt the bond between her and Kaelin, the trust they had built, the the shared power that flowed between them. She knew she could not fight this alone, but she could fight with him. The entity struck first, a wave of dark energy rippling toward them like a storm. Lyra's magic surged instinctively, forming a protective barrier around them both. The collision of light and darkness sent snow swirling into the sky. Kaelin's hand found hers again, and together, their magic intertwined, stronger, brighter, unyielding. The entity recoiled, surprised by the strength of the bond. "Impossible," it hissed. "You are bound by fate, not choice. Yet choice can undo even the oldest magic." Lyra's mind cleared. She saw the threads of the curse, the connections that bound her former mate, the army, and the entity itself. And she realized the only way to destroy the curse completely was to face it directly, to risk herself entirely, and to trust Kaelin beyond measure. "Kaelin," she said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest, "I am ready. Whatever it takes, I will end this." Kaelin's eyes softened and he nodded. "Together," he said, "always together." With a shared breath, they stepped forward, letting the entity's darkness envelop them. Lyra felt fear, pain, and memories of betrayal wash over her, but she held onto Kaelin's hand, his presence, their bond. She let the magic flow through her fully, merging with Kaelin's, forming a blinding light that cut through the shadow like a blade. The entity screamed, a sound of fury and despair as the light seared through the darkness. Lyra's former mate, now freed from the curse, rose to his feet and watched, awe and gratitude in his eyes, no longer a threat. The battle was not silent. Snow and magic swirled like a storm, and time seemed to stretch, suspended in the brilliance of their combined power. And then, with a final pulse of energy, the entity shattered. The curse broke. The shadows dissolved. The air cleared, crisp and still. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted but alive, her magic spent. Kaelin was beside her instantly, lifting her gently, concern etched on his face. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low, trembling with unspoken emotion. Lyra shook her head, a smile breaking through her exhaustion. "No, I am free," she whispered, "and so is he." She gestured toward her former mate, who stood silently, watching them. There was no hatred in his gaze, only understanding. Kaelin set her down carefully, kneeling to meet her eyes. "You were remarkable," he said softly. "You faced fear, betrayal, darkness, and you emerged stronger. I have never known anyone like you." Lyra's heart fluttered, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with magic. "And I could not have done it without you," she said. I trusted you when I could trust no one else." Kaelin's dark eyes softened further, the shadow of his past loss fading. He reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "And I am no longer afraid to trust, not with you." The wind howled around them, carrying snow and whispers, but Lyra felt a peace she had never known. The castle, the cliffs, the frozen world beyond, they no longer felt like a prison. They were witnesses to something greater, the bond she shared with Kaelin, a bond forged not only by fate but by choice, courage, and trust. That evening, in the great hall of the castle, Lyra and Kaelin stood together as the kingdom's advisors and allies gathered. The threat had passed, but the memory of the curse lingered, a reminder of the fragile balance between light and dark. Lyra's former mate approached, bowing respectfully to Kaelin and Lyra. "Thank you," he said simply, "for saving me and for saving her." Lyra nodded, feeling a closure she had not thought possible. Betrayal had come, but it had not broken her. Darkness had risen, but it had been defeated. And through it all, the bond between her and Kaelin had grown, tempered in fire and shadow, unyielding and true. Later, alone in the quiet of the castle, Lyra and Kaelin walked along the high balcony, overlooking the snow-covered cliffs. The wind was cold, but their hands were warm as they clasped together. "You have changed, Lyra," Kaelin said softly. "You are stronger than any magic, any curse, any threat that exists." Lyra smiled, her breath fogging in the icy air. "And so have you," she replied. "I saw the fear in you once, the fear of losing again, but you did not. You trusted me and I trusted you. That is stronger than anything the world could throw at us." Kalen looked at her, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. "Then we face the future together," he said. "Whatever comes, whatever challenges remain, we face them as one." Lyra felt a warmth fill her chest, a light she had never known. The castle, the kingdom, the cliffs, they were witnesses to the beginning of something new, something unbreakable. The darkness had not destroyed them. It had only brought them closer. As the sun set, painting the snow in shades of gold and crimson, Kalen leaned close, his voice a low whisper. "Lyra, you are no longer the hunted. You are the one who chooses, and I choose you." Lyra's heart leapt. "And I choose you," she whispered back, their hands tightening, their bond solidified. Far below, the shadows stirred one last time, but there was no longer malice. Only the promise of a kingdom protected, of a bond unbroken, and of a love forged in darkness and light alike. The cliffs of Urindor stood silent, the wind carrying whispers of hope, courage, and destiny. And in that silence, Lyra and Kalen stood together, survivors of betrayal, conquerors of curses, and bound by a connection older than magic itself. For in a world of kings, curses, and shadows, they had found each other, and in each other they had found their future.